Welcome to our final parallel session, last session before the closing and the announcement of the Internationally Learning Award winners. So it's our 3:30 session, and it's good to have everyone back with us. And our first speaker in the session comes from Teachers College, right here, and where I teach part-time as well. And JD is here to talk about the effectiveness of an intelligent question answering system for teaching financial literacy, and it's a pilot study. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that and its results. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. You want to share your screen at your convenience and take it away.
Thank you, David. Let me share my screen.
Great.
Can everyone, can you see my screen? Yeah.
Yep, everything looks good. If you're gonna, yep, perfect. Now it's in show mode. Perfect, all good.
All right. So my name is JD Jayaraman, and this is joint work with Dr. John Black, and I'm an associate professor in finance and data science at New Jersey City University, and also a PhD candidate at Teachers College. So the title of my study is Effectiveness of an Intelligent Question Answering System for Teaching Financial Literacy. And this is a pilot study that I'm presenting. The agenda today is going to be, I'll start off with a brief introduction, and I will outline the research questions, set up the theoretical framework, describe the IQA system, and go over the research design, results, limitations, and conclude. So that's the agenda for today. So what I wanted to do is, since financial literacy is not really often talked about topic, I wanted to kind of set the stage of what is financial literacy, why is it important, and that is something that I wanted to share up front, since it's not like math or English or other things that are often researched. This domain is not that often researched. So the financial literacy is defined by the Program for International Student Assessment, the PISA program, which many of us in the education field are familiar with. So it defines financial literacy as the knowledge and understanding of financial concepts, the risk, skills, and motivation and confidence to apply that knowledge, and to make effective decisions across a range of financial contexts to improve one's financial well-being, right? So the definition is very comprehensive, and it has three parts to it. One is the knowledge and understanding of financial concepts. The other is the motivation and confidence to apply such knowledge. And the third is to make effective decisions with that knowledge, right? So our study here focuses mostly on the knowledge aspect of things. We are not so much interested in researching the motivation and the effective decision making. Why is financial literacy important? And this is something that's kind of I'm passionate about, and I have a background in finance, and so this is something that nobody talks about, but it's a very, very important thing and affects almost all of us, either directly or indirectly. Right? So the PISA survey, for example, the most recent one, 15-year-olds, showed that the United States has a very low levels of financial literacy, and it's below the average of OECD countries. And the situation is overall bad across the world. The percentage of technically or financially literate people are only 33%. Right? So in the US, it's around 40 to 45, that range. So here financial literacy really means very basic finance, very basic personal finance, things like knowing about interest rates, your credit cards, mortgages, that type of stuff, right? So it's kind of concerning that young people in the United States don't really have that type of basic personal finance knowledge. So what are the consequences of this lack of knowledge about basic personal finance, the numerous consequences, right? And again, some that are obvious, some that are not obvious. And so the lack of financial literacy leads to increase in debt and cost of borrowing. It leads people to plan less for retirement. It leads people to accumulate less wealth. So it has a lot of impacts, right? If you do not gain enough knowledge about personal finance early on, your financial well-being later in life and is greatly affected in terms of accumulating wealth or preparing for retirement, buying a house. All these things get affected. Most pretty striking example of lack of financial literacy leading to some bad consequences is the 2008 financial crisis. And so one of the causes of that crisis can be linked back to lack of financial literacy, right? So one of them, as you many know, the main cause of that crisis was the mortgages, right? And the lack of knowledge about various types of mortgages, the interest rate structures, and how much one pays, and all that kind of thing partly led to the financial crisis. So, what is the motivation behind this study, and why am I interested in this topic? Again, the consequences of financial literacy make it a really important topic. For me personally, it's on par with math or language arts, anything else like that. But the important point is there is not much research done on personal finance education or financial literacy, right? So effective methods of delivering financial education, these are not part of the research agenda for most people, right? So what we need to do is, given the importance of this domain, there needs to be more work done to investigate innovative methods of teaching financial literacy. And one approach that one can take is through the use of cutting edge technology, right? So you can use intelligent tutoring systems, intelligent question answering systems, et cetera, to deliver financial literacy education or support financial literacy education, right? These things are used in other fields like math, science, language arts, and other areas. But in financial literacy, I don't think there is anything at all at this stage. So to the best of my knowledge, then this is the first attempt at trying to build the intelligent question answering system in the domain of financial literacy. Of course, it's been done in other domains, but what I'm trying to do here is trying to extend that to the financial literacy domain and adapt it to this domain. Let's see. So the research questions that I'm trying to answer with this study are: how can we build a cutting-edge intelligent QA system for practice and scaffolding the domain of financial literacy? Right. So the key thing is I'm looking to build a system not necessarily for full-fledged teaching of financial literacy, but more as a support system for practice and scaffolding. Right? So that is the important point here. The second question is, does the use of such an IQA system increase learning in the domain of financial literacy? Right? So is it effective? Does it increase learning? And the third question is, how does it increase learning? Right? So those are the three questions that I'm trying to research. And this pilot study is kind of like the beginning of this research. The theoretical framework of the study is based on the theory of skill acquisition, is from Anderson, 1982. And the theory says that skill acquisition has two phases. One is a cognitive phase, where a declarative representation of the procedure is established, and an associative phase characterized by the proceduralization of the skill, which leads to automation, right? So in this associative phase, much practice is necessary with not much close supervision other than corrective feedback, right? So um, it is also needs to be individualized to a certain extent based on the student. So if you think about these two criterion, the IQA system kind of is ideally suited for providing the student with individualized practice. Right? So that is kind of the one of the theories um, underlying the study. And the other theory is the theory behind instructional scaffolding. Scaffolding, we've heard this word used all the time. And it's kind of related to the zone of proximal development, which we all know. The IQA system basically scaffolds the students' learning by allowing them to use the system to find answers to questions as they are studying or as they are learning the content, right? So it's kind of has two purposes: one to provide practice, and the other is to provide scaffolding by means of answering questions, right? So these are the two things that are underlying the system, the theoretical underpinnings of the system. Let me get into describing the system itself. The system consists of three parts, three modules, basically. One is the question answering module, the second is the evaluation module, and the third is the feedback module. So I'll briefly touch on what each module does. Right? So the question answering module is based on the popular state-of-the-art NLP, natural language processing model from Google, which is called BERT. And I guess now there are even more powerful models that have come out, but BERT is still a very heavily used NLP language model. And we leverage the BERT model in this building this system. And in particular, we used a closed domain question answering system that's called CDQA Suite. And this is public domain software that's out there. The libraries are out there for in open source. So we use that library. And this library comes with the pre-trained BERT question answering model that's trained on the SQuAD database. And for the pilot study, we essentially focused on one particular topic in financial literacy, because financial literacy in and of itself is a pretty broad topic. So we've, in order to make the study manageable, we focused on consumer credit, which is basically credit cards, mortgages, and things like that. So we trained the BERT QA model with a data set curated for this domain of consumer credit. So we created a data set that consists of paragraphs and question answers from various books and websites on the topic of consumer finance. And we used that to further train the BERT QA model. The evaluation module is compares the student's answer to the question answering module's answer. So in some ways, the student types in an answer, the answer gets compared to the answer generated by the BERT QA model, which is technically the right answer, right, or the ideal answer. And it calculates what's called a BERT score. And BERT score is a text matching evaluation metric based on BERT embeddings, and it's used widely as well, and it kind of has been shown to closely correlate with human judgments. So we've used the BERT score as a measure of how good is the student's answer. And the student's answer is scored as a percentage based on the BERT score. The feedback module is currently a rule-based system, and it's a pretty simple rule-based system for this pilot study. We didn't have the time to make it super sophisticated, but if the BERT scores are about 0.8, we basically provide a congratulatory feedback and move on to the next question. But if the scores between 0.6 and 0.8, we ask the student to improve the current answer and highlight the part of their answer that is different from the correct answer. If the score is below 0.6, we ask the student to redo the answer. Right. So it's a fairly simple rule-based feedback, which essentially can be improved, and that's one of the limitations of this study that I talk about at the end. So what's the workflow of the system? The system basically posts a question randomly chosen from a list of 150 questions grouped by 5 levels of difficulty. So the student starts off the practice and the system generates randomly a question picked from this, the lowest level of difficulty. And then the system becomes adaptive based on, again, rules. So it's again a fairly straightforward rule-based adaptivity, and not necessarily as intelligent adaptiveness. So what we do is, if the student gets 0.8 or about 3 times in a row, and then we go on to the next level of difficulty and so on. Right? Also, at any point during the practice session or otherwise, the student can basically ask any question. Right. So this is the scaffolding part where the student can just click a button and put in a question, and the system answers that question. So that is independent of the practice module and can be accessed at any time. So that's kind of like, in a nutshell, a high-level overview of the system itself. So next, I'll describe the research design that we use to answer whether the IQA system was effective or not. So again, this is a straightforward one group pre-test, post-test design. And since this is just a pilot study, we also have a fairly small sample. We used a 15-question assessment instrument to measure learning pre and post the IQA system. The instrument was basically questions taken from standard textbooks. Then we also used a short survey to assess the effectiveness of the IQA system. And we also interviewed the students to understand how the IQA system helped them learn. So these are the 3 things we did. So basically, the students attended a 2-hour lecture on consumer credit that also included a short tutorial on how to use the IQA system. After the lecture was over, they were given a homework due before the next class, which is in a week's time, to practice using the IQA system. The students had to answer at least 30 questions with a bird score of 0.8 or higher. And of that 30, they needed to have at least 5 questions at the highest level of difficulty. The pre-test was administered after the lecture, but before students started using the IQA system. The post-test and the survey were administered when they came back to class the next week and before the lecture started. So that's kind of the procedure. And let me show you the results for the study. Again, the sample size was pretty small. There's only 15 students participated, and since this pilot study, the sample size is pretty small. Since the sample size is very small, I've used non-parametric statistics to assess learning gains. So here in these tables that I've shown here, you can see that the PCS in this table stands for percentage correct score. Basically, how many questions, what percentage of questions you got right on your assessment. Right? So you can see that from pre and post, the increase in the PCS is about 19%, and the effect size is about 1.8, 1.9, which is a fairly large effect size. Again, since this is a small sample, I used the Wilcoxon sign rank test, non-parametric test, and the non-parametric shows that the difference in the pre and post PCS percentage correct scores are pretty statistically significant. The survey questions we asked are over here. We asked, did the IQA system homework help you learn better? How accurate did you think were the answers provided by the system? We wanted to get a sense for how good is the system as well, so we can improve on it, in the next iteration of the study. So we do see that the system did help, but we do see here as well that things can be improved, right? So that's the takeaway from this survey we did. And we also did interviews, like I said, with this small group of students, and asked them, how did it actually help, and how did it help? And just to get a sense for, okay, what's going on here? How is this system helping you? And it was not necessarily a very structured interview. It's a more open-ended, semi-structured interview. And the main thing that people said was it did let them practice at their own pace. And one thing they always said was, and the question answering is good because I don't have to ask questions, be shy about asking questions like I am in class, where many students don't actually ask questions because they're just shy to ask questions. And so that's what we found in that. And in terms of limitations, again, I've talked about a lot of this already. It's a small sample size since it's just a pilot study, and we also know from the surveys and from we knew when we designed it itself is there are lots of improvements we can make on the feedback system because it's just a rule-based system. We can also make improvements on the adaptiveness of the system as well to make it more smart, more intelligent. And so all these things are being worked on. They take time to build. So we wanted to get something out there quick and see if it actually makes a difference. And that's the reason. So a lot of the drawbacks were expected, limitations were expected. Again, in order to really make concrete conclusions that the system actually is causing learning gains and is better than just a paper and pencil practice like in good old days, we really need to do a randomized control trial. And that is on our agenda next. But to conclude, this is, to my knowledge, the first attempt at using such a system to teach personal finance or support the teaching of personal finance. So in the domain of personal finance, financial literacy, to the best of my knowledge, this is the first attempt. Of course, such attempts have been done in other areas like math and science. The results of this pilot study were encouraging in the sense that we do see large gains, but of course, the sample size is small, so it needs to be taken with a grain of salt. But the pilot study does indicate that there is enough evidence there to pursue this further and to even pursue with the main study and take it further and do the randomized control trial. So that's of course the randomized control trial is the most important thing, along with some improvements we need to make to the system. And that is the next step in our agenda. And that is all I had. If there are any questions, I can take them.
All right, well, great. Well, thanks so much. There's time for a question or two. I was kind of curious, is there an example you can give of just what a sample question and response might be from the system that you had? Just depending on
yeah, so let me stop sharing. So things would be, so it'll be like this, like where what is consumer credit? The answer would be what is credit? What is, so we essentially, this the type of, it's not you're not asking very complex questions. It's fairly straightforward to that aspect. The more we train it, the more we train the thing, the more complex it gets. At this point, we've curated about 150 such questions, and it's not, you're not asking these exact questions. You can word the question however you want, but the system will kind of answer it based on how you train the system, right? So that's the, there's more work needs to be done in training it further. That's always the problem with these NLP systems, is you got to have reams of data to train it well to make it answer. But the good thing with the BERT is that it's already pre-trained on language data, so it can answer questions much better than a straight ground up system. So that's the nice thing about it.
Oh no, it's cool. No, I'm interested. I'll have to read the paper and learn a little bit more about it. I think I mentioned earlier today, I did some parsing related work way back, and it kind of, that field seemed to kind of have stalled for a little bit, and I think doing it in a close domain, closely held domain is really the only way to go, which is what you're doing, and it's great to see that you're getting some results. I'm really interested in that.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and say hello to John Black for us here. Many of us know John. So
I will.
Great. Well, great to see you. And I think we can wrap up. So we're on to time. We're on time for the next talk. So we're going to move on to the next talk. So thanks again, JD. It's great to meet you.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you, and take care.
You too. All right. So ready for the next one. right, next up is Sergio Gelvax from Nautilus MedTech in Brazil. And this is on using virtual reality to teach anesthesiologists in the use of pumps for total intravenous anesthesia. So it's a real life VR prototype course. So really looking forward to learning more about this. So Sergio, thanks for being here. It's great to see you. And I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to share your screen, what's convenient for you, and you can just take it away.
Are you seeing?
We are seeing, perfect. Okay.
20 minutes.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect. Great.
That's fine.
Looks great.
All right. Good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to thank the organization of this conference for the invitation to talk a little bit about our learning idea regarding training of anesthesiologists, and as such a specific but very relevant topic in our practice. I'm Sergio Gelvax, anesthesiologist and entrepreneur, founder and director of a health tech company in Brazil called Nautilus MedTech. Our purpose is to create and develop new and more effective methods of learning with a focus on teamwork and human factors into the healthcare systems. So I'd like to say that's a pretty new project developed by our company in a partnership with the pharma and edtech companies in Brazil, specifically in Rio de Janeiro. And I'm very proud to say that. Despite this partnership, I must declare that I have no conflict of interest. We developed this MVP in the beginning of 2020s, and we are ready to test in a presidential meeting in São Paulo, just when the pandemic COVID started and changed the way we live in the world. So till now, we couldn't test the product as we wanted, but I hope to do that as soon as possible. Besides that, I'd like to dedicate this presentation in the memory of all people who suffered from this terrible disease all over the world. Just in order to contextualize the reason of why we decided to do this kind of a learning project, and also supposing that many of the audience probably doesn't know about the anesthesiologist practice, I decided to begin with a brief explanation about one of the problems we face in our daily work and why it's so important to learn about this issue. The anesthesiologist is the guy that puts you to sleep during a surgical procedure, as you may probably know. But more important than that, he or she is the responsible for keeping your physiological state under control and safe. The fact is that we work in a very complex and dynamic environment, frequently interfacing with multiple high technological devices. That makes anesthesia practice safer than years ago, but on the other hand, this complexity may also provide an environment more prone to errors and failures. So the medical community in general became more aware about medical errors in healthcare systems since the first report from the American Institute of Medicine from 1999. And today we all know that errors in the healthcare system is the third leading cause of death in the world, just behind cardiovascular and cancer disease. This is an alarming evidence. Again, in order to understand the context of our learning project, I must tell you a little bit about total intravenous anesthesia. So TIVA, total intravenous anesthesia, is a technique to provide anesthesia to someone else through injection of anesthetic drugs intravenously. That can be done by bolus injections from time to time, according to the patient status during surgery, or by infusion pumps in a continuously way. The great advantage in using infusion pumps for anesthesia is to keep the anesthetic drug concentrations more stable and reliable during the procedure, sometimes with less side effects or complications. But not always that's true. Even when using infusion pumps, especially those manually programmed, some errors may occur. For example, in this study, we can see that there was a high incidence of infusion rate errors, basically caused by an error in the infusion pump programming. So in order to deal with this problem, some new infusion pumps appeared on the market in the last few years, so-called smart pumps. The difference is the implementation of a software inside them, such mathematical models that can calculate automatically the adequate infusion rates for your purpose during the anesthesia. It means that smart pumps are more reliable and safer than the manual ones, but still there is a problem. In a very recent review in meta-analysis, we can say that together with the technology comes the complexity, and that makes anesthesiologists refuse to use them or use them inappropriately in their clinical practice. So, in the bottom line, it's all about human factors, and that's our main focus of study, essentially. And besides all that, medication errors have a huge economic impact in the healthcare system. It means an average cost of about $4,700 per admission, according to Bates and colleagues in this study. So let's talk a little bit about the TIVA experience. TIVA experience is a kind of course done in a partnership project with Aspen Pharma in Brazil. It was already great innovative in the way we decided to teach anesthesiologists, especially those who are in training, in the use of a new device for total intravenous anesthesia. As I said before, there are some barriers to start using new and complex devices in healthcare systems that limit their use and even can harm the patient by their misuse. In this learning model, we decided to use realistic simulations to reproduce the context of a real anesthesia practice and give the students the opportunity to manage and deal with the specific infusion pump and the eventual troubleshoots during these scenarios. In this period of time, we've trained more than 400 students, anesthesiologists in their last years of residence in the TIVA experience program. And here are some of the results. Despite there was a first reaction evaluation, we can see at least that was very acceptable by them. In this graphic, they rated some of the activities we did in this presential program, and they rated very well. Okay. But in our vision, as educators, there were some barriers. There are some problems here. Let's say limitations problems with this TIVA experience. That's a presential course. There were a limited number of students per course, limited time for hands-on practice, limited resources, human and material, limited investment, and limited face-to-face interaction, especially because the COVID-19 pandemics. So those were some of the motivations that inspired us to think about new solutions for training. And that's why we thought about virtual reality as a new idea for learning. So our biggest challenge when I start to think about this was to be able to transfer our experience with simulated classroom teaching to virtual or distance learning, maintaining the same principles of this methodology. And I think that's the same problems most educators face around the world when they have to transfer the presential learning to a kind of a distance of virtual, any kind of distance learning. That they have the same problem that we are facing. So the basic principles that we used to use during simulation training follows the adult learning theories. In general, our students' audience tends to be self-oriented, internally motivated. They prefer to learn by experience, hands-on, and the content must be meaningful for them. That's basically the COPE's learning circle. It means first, the student is submitted to an experience, more realistic is better, in general accompanied by feelings that remains in the long-term memory, making links for future reminds of the similar experiences. The reflection phase it's very important to realize what happened in simulated realistic experience. It's an observation exercise done by a facilitator or even by the peers. Effective reflection leads to reach a state of abstract conceptualizations about the specific contextualized event they just experienced. And then the students may be submitted to a new context or a new experience to test if their conceptualization were right or not, if the decision made were good or should be better. That's done in an infinite way till masterization of skills. And that leads to transformation that for us means learning. And finally, we've got to the virtual reality project. This is an MVP product done again in a partnership with the Aspen Farm in Brazil. At this moment, we developed only part of the entire TV experience project as I show you. That's a very new way to teach about the usability of an infusion pump for intravenous anesthesia. The learning objectives here were to set the correct parameters in a virtual infusion pump, to induce an anesthesia with other anesthetic drugs to see the interaction with effects, to deal with troubleshoots during the scenario, and to exercise some non-technical skills to manage a critical situation among the team. For those proposed, we had to create a virtual environment that was a surgical theater, a virtual patient, virtual devices to provide anesthesia, including a totally virtual and manageable infusion pump. And besides the design, there is a huge simulation program in order to give information in real time and in a logical reactive way to students' actions. Information to make decisions comes from the monitors, the call boxes, and from the avatars into the platform. At bottom line, the student must set up the infusion pump according to the context given, induce an anesthesia with other drugs, and make decisions to solve some problems during the scenario. At the end, the students get a feedback about their actions with suggestions for future experiences. They also rank students according to their performance in the platform. And now I'd like to show you a short video that's a demonstration of this virtual environment. And I will explain to you some things here. So that's the introduction. It's like a tutorial for the students when he puts on the glass and enter into the virtual environment.
Todos os botões que há ícone de mão podem ser apertados. A seguir, vamos aprender como interagir.
In this tutorial, they are explaining what the student has to do in this virtual environment. So there are syringes with some anesthetic drugs, what they have to do with the syringe, how they can manage this syringe, to handle this syringe, how can they use the syringe. So all this is a tutorial. And that's the virtual environment with a virtual patient, and virtual monitors, virtual machine, virtual devices. That's here the virtual infusion pump. And that was made in such a way that could be totally manageable by the students. As you can see here, this video. The idea was to induce a total intravenous anesthesia to this patient using anesthetic drugs as usual. And all these parameters in these monitors here, they react with the dignity to any action of the students during the scenario. So if he injects any drug for amnesia, for sedation, so all parameters will change automatically. Here's the student managing the infusion pump, using the infusion pump, setting the parameters. And here in this environment, he can do any errors, any mistakes that he could do with no patient at risk. Once the patient is asleep with this anesthetic drug, one problem occurs during the surgery. So there was an obstruction here in the infusion, and the patient stops to receive the anesthetic drug. So what happens next is the patient begins to arousal from the anesthesia, and the surgeon here is an avatar, claims to the anesthesiologist what is happening, what's going on. The blood pressure is going up because the patient is not receiving this drug. So the task to the student is to discover this obstruction, to find this obstruction, solve this problem, and then adjust again the infusion rate in order to put the patient asleep again and to get down the blood pressure, and the surgeon could continue the operation, surgery. So there was a simple conflict, a simple crisis here that student has to resolve, has to deal, to manage with the other members of the team. And at the end, the student gets a feedback and the ranking based on their actions during this scenario. So for the future, we hope to develop the entire TIVA experience, that's a presential course, develop this entire into the VR model of learning. It means create a more engaging and self-oriented platform, probably using some kind of artificial intelligence to guide the students over the path of new knowledge. And that's our new big idea for learning, using virtual reality to train anesthesiologists. A specific task that's using a new device like this infusion pump, for example. That's it. Thank you all for the attention.
Great. Well, thank you so much. That's really interesting what you're doing. There's a little bit of time for questions, and I'm also curious a little bit about, so I think I saw at the end, there's feedback at the end of the scenario. Are there times where there's feedback anywhere else, or it's all at the end? So, yeah, are there mistakes that you would make that you would get feedback immediately because they're so significant?
Yeah, we can see how many mistakes the student did in the platform and put it in the feedback.
Okay, so you wait till the end, but you're counting the mistakes that they made.
Yeah, we are trying to put some gamification into the platform. So we thought about the ranking of the students. So those that make more score, they are pointed at the top of the ranking, things like this. And we are testing how the public will react to this.
That's it. When they get the feedback at the end, does it explain the mistakes that they made, or is it more just the score at this? I know this is the MVP. Is it?
Yes,
at this point?
Because the idea is to put all the TIVA experience, that's a complete course, into the platform. So there are theoretical content also on the platform. So if they did mistakes in the virtual environment, probably they have some gaps on knowledge or in other skills. So they have to come back to knowledge or to some knowledge source to study more, and then come back to the experience. So it's a continuum, it's a cycle. So they do mistakes, and they come back to study more, and they try to experience again and see the results. That's the idea.
Yeah, no, okay, that's great. Does the system tell them what to study, or is it really up to them to figure out what they think they need to go back and look at if they make mistakes?
We're just trying to see how they will react to this. Okay? The acceptance, the usability. we are in a very incipient testing, and a beta testing, as you can call this.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. How did the process work, just in terms of creating and developing this? If you can tell us a little bit about sort of how this all got done, and kind of what the different roles were. I think the audience would be curious about it. The people involved.
How the process was done?
For how you created this. So who were the people involved? How did we go from idea to creating this whole VR environment?
I had the idea.
Uh-huh.
The idea came from my experience with the simulation, the clinical simulation, medical simulation, and the Nautilus Meditech is a content company. So we had to work with a tech company that developed all the virtual environment and all the programming, the things. And we had a client that was the pharma company. So we did all the partnership between the three companies that we worked together. So meanwhile, that's the way we are working here. We are just testing how people will receive this kind of training. But it's a pretty new modality to teach someone else, especially adults, especially anesthesiologists. And we are just testing the reaction and see how the people will receive this. I think, I have a feeling that will be very well received, very well accepted. And then the next step is to develop all the course in this modality. So also the theoretical content, to put it in some kind of a distance learning modality, maybe using virtual reality or not, but all the content of the course will be in the platform. So it would be very easier to do this, especially in this time of pandemic. So that's the idea. I think, I have a feeling that will be very acceptable by the people.
Yeah, no, I would think so. Have you had a chance to test on the real audience a little bit so far, or not?
We are just testing just now, because the pandemic here is diminishing, is reducing. So we are starting to come back to presential courses, and during this presential course, we are putting the Oculus Quest, and testing with some people for experiences.
Okay, good. So it's too early to know what they think, but you're certainly optimistic that they're going to feel.
Yeah,
feel
it's
really
it's just an example of how to use virtual reality to teach in some specific issue. I'm trying to do this also with the area management for anesthesiologists, and is another project that I'm trying to do here in Brazil. Even my thesis, master thesis in the University of São Paulo, we are just starting to try this kind of a modality for learning.
That's great. With the during the rest of the process, I'm curious to know how you worked with the technical companies. They were going to program it, they were going to build this, but I assume you had to sort of explain what you needed to create. And so I'm curious to know sort of what the roles were. Where did they get involved, and where was it kind of something that you were able to just dictate to them?
Yeah, what I have to do is to sit with them and explain how is all the process of thinking during a scenario. Okay, I have to imagine what the students may do or may not do during a scenario, and put this thing programmable setup already in the platform, in the virtual environment. So when the student gives a dose X, so the patient will react in such a way. If the dose is another, so the reaction is different. So we have to prevent all these actions from the students and put maximum options we can do into the program that is in the environment.
No, that makes sense. Did you sketch a lot of these things out, or was this all kind of done through conversations with the software company, and then they would kind of run things by you? I'm just curious to know how I've worked in this way and did a lot of different roles. I'm curious to know how it worked with you.
Yeah, I've saw that there are some people here in the conference that use this kind of things. As Fernando, I've talked to Fernando already
Okay. Yeah. Oh, good,
about
good.
this, and then maybe we can do should do some kind of a experience or partnership here using these kind of technologies. But it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you worked with your software company that you worked with, did they you had conversation with them? Did you kind of have to write out like, kind of each decision point, like each point in the in the virtual world where something could happen, and then they would program based on those and what the consequences were?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I had to sit with them. Indeed, they were in São Paulo, and I'm here in Rio. So,
Okay.
but I sit with them. It was just before the pandemic.
Okay.
I sat with them, and then we did it together. It's just an MVP. It's a little part of the whole project.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just curious about the process. So then, did you review certain versions of it before it went? You were the primary reviewer before it got as far as it did. Like they would give you things for you to test and review in the VR world, and you could give feedback.
No, we have very few feedbacks from
Okay.
from this project.
Right, so early.
Yeah.
Right. Great. So then what's coming up next? So right now you're kind of getting serious about the testing, right? So you're at the good stage to get
Yes.
a lot of people to test.
We are doing many TIVA experiences here. Once a month, we have a course. It's presential course. So during this presential course, we've already will test some people to put the glass and see the reactions. If we get some more resources, also we'll develop all the entire course. That's the idea. And then spread it to others, to other places that are interested in this kind of training. Aspen Pharma was worked with us as a partnership, but Aspen Pharma is a multinational company, so they are in a very in many countries, also here in Brazil. But this experience is unique in the world for them. Okay, is any place is the only place in the world that did this kind of experience of idea, a new modality of training. The same way I tried to make some partnership with other companies that have some interest in the training in some devices or materials or special tasks, and then I talk to them and develop some curriculum using new modalities of learning, or combining them to reach the best results that we can to learning of the public.
Great. So there's a lot to look forward to. So I know you said you wanted to, after the testing results, then expand and make create a much larger virtual reality environment.
I hope next year, I could bring to you some more results, more effective results about the usability of this modality, with the more responses, more results from the students, not from the public, about this.
Great. I'm looking forward to it. Well, thank you so much. I think we're just about the end of the time. It was great to see this, and I'm excited about the future of it, and really glad to have you here. So Joe, thanks for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. It was my pleasure.
Absolutely. Hope to see you again next year with more. So really looking forward to that already. Well, terrific. Well, we're going to move to the next talk and the final talk in the session. So up next, we see the video intro. So Lewis Johnson is here with the talk that I'm really looking forward to talk about integrating intelligent avatars with classroom teaching. Talk about a teaching experience that integrates avatars with homework activities so people can practice at home and get personalized feedback and exercises with monitoring from teachers. So it's a really interesting approach that I'm looking forward to hearing more about. And so Lewis, it's great to have you here, and I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take it away.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. And what I should explain, the background you see is actually near my home in Kona, Hawaii, where I spent much of the past pandemic year in isolation. But I'm calling today from Los Angeles. So let me.
It seems like you're doing pretty well either way. So all right.
Exactly.
Really? Okay. All right.
All right. So let me share my screen.
Great.
And then we will get started.
Perfect. All right. Yep. We can see it.
Good. And start slideshow.
Yep.
There we go. Okay.
Great.
So I'm going to be talking today about our work to integrate intelligent avatars with classroom teaching. A little background on myself. My background is in artificial intelligence and education. I headed a university research lab for a number of years and then founded my own company to commercialize and scale up the technology that we had been developing. The focus of my talk today is really, starting point is the COVID-19 pandemic and its effect on learning. And as we all know, when the lockdowns began, classroom instruction had to move online. And it revealed a lot of problems that arise when classroom instruction is put in an online situation. And so here are examples of some of the complaints that we saw reported by students and by teachers, that basically students felt that they were learning a lot less. They had trouble understanding what the professor was saying. They didn't get as much one-on-one time. Conversely, teachers complained that it took much more time to accomplish tasks on Zoom, and it really wasn't working as effectively. And basically what we saw was that people were just trying to take their existing teaching practices, move them online on video conference. It wasn't working well for them. And also the software tools that were available to them were not designed to support a virtual online experience. So we felt that the technology that we developed for avatars, avatar-based learning, could help. And so we then proceeded to adapt our online learning platform called nSkill, which incorporates AI at a number of levels to facilitate learning, to adapt it to better address the needs of this remote learning context. And I'll show you some examples of what we did. So what nSkill provides is an opportunity to practice skills with AI avatars. We say it's in a safe environment because it doesn't matter if you make mistakes, no risk of embarrassing yourself. And this we've used extensively for learning foreign languages, learning foreign cultures. We are seeing other applications in the workplace as well, which I'll get to in a moment. But it's more than just practicing with an avatar. At the end of each episode or session, you get feedback on how well you did. You get personalized exercises in the areas where you need further practice. And it provides analytics to teachers, to various stakeholders to track their progress. So what we've recognized in the COVID context is we had to do more to provide analytics to teachers so that they could safely integrate this type of online learning with their teaching, but at the same time, track the students' progress, making sure that they are on a good learning trajectory. And that's precisely what we did. So I'll give you a quick demonstration initially to orient you here. So let me go to my web browser. And so you can access N-Skill from a web browser on a range of different devices, both laptop computers as well as mobile devices. And I've got the instructor view now, so I can see a number of different classes that are active in different places around the world. Some of them that other people are giving. For example, here's a class in Kazakhstan, as well as some courses that we are also giving online, integrating this technology. So we're now using this as part of a course to train community health workers to be able to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. But to start here, I'll show you from one of our English language learning products. And English is an important and useful subject area for this type of practice, because lots of students in many countries, they want to learn to speak English, but they don't get enough opportunity to practice. And this got even worse, of course, during the pandemic when people were staying at home. So using N-Skill, you can practice with avatars and get feedback on how well you did. So the example I'm going to show you here is one where I have a task to perform. I'm going to the train station to buy a train ticket, and I need to be able to make sure I get on the right train and for the right price. And so there's a lot of give and take involved here. So I'm not following a script, but I'm just communicating as would be typical or appropriate in this kind of situation. So let me start the conversation.
Hi, welcome to the Metropolitan train station. Where are you traveling to?
So we designed these so that these can support students at different levels of proficiency. So beginners, if they're not sure what to say, they can ask for hints. But we're using natural language processing and speech processing technology, so the learner is not limited to these particular responses. They could simply say, I want to go to New York.
Great, I can help you plan your trip to New York. What day would you like to depart?
And if the student is having a little bit of trouble following, they can view a transcript. And by the way, the instructor, if the student is relying a lot on hints or viewing the transcript to get through this, the instructor now sees that. They can see to what extent the student is able to complete the conversation unassisted. So I'll briefly continue the conversation, just so you can see the feedback at the end. Let's see, so what day would you like to depart? My mouse is being a little unresponsive. I'd like to travel on May 1st, please.
I have a couple of trains that day. Does the train leaving at 2 p.m. work for you?
Possibly. When does that train arrive?
The train will arrive at 10 p.m.
No, that train's too late. Do you have an earlier train?
I have a train leaving at 8 a.m.
When does that train arrive?
The train will arrive at 4 p.m.
That's good. Book me on the 8 a.m. train, please.
Okay, a one-way ticket in first class is $175, and a coach ticket is $100. Would you like a first class or coach ticket?
I'm on a budget, so you better give me a coach ticket, please.
Okay, do you need a second ticket to return?
Not right now, thanks.
Okay, we charge $20 for each bag and allow up to 2 bags. Will you have any luggage?
Yes, I'll have 2 bags.
Okay, I'll have your total in a moment. Great! I have 1 coach ticket for you and 2 bags. That will be $140. Enjoy New York!
So now I get immediate feedback on how well I did. My overall score was not particularly good. So why was that? Part of it was, let's see, I met most of the objectives that I was expected to complete, but I did not indicate my times for, say enough about departure and return. I did not even buy a return ticket. And the time that I spent was much too high. So the reason in this case was because I was talking as I was giving the demonstration. But this metric, time spent, is very useful for a couple of reasons. One, we're interested in the total amount of time people are spending practicing in conversation, but we also want to see, can they complete a conversation at a normal speaking rate? So clearly I have not met that objective yet. So now I have the opportunity, I can practice the conversation again, or it's selected for me some exercises that will allow me to work on the skills where it looks like I need to help and need further help. So, but now let me show you what the instructor sees from all of this. So now, and again, this is what we developed to support instructors during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I happen to show you a class that's currently active in Mexico this summer. And so here we can see actual students who have started using the platform, and we see some of them have practiced just a small amount of time. Some of them have practiced quite a bit. So like this Manuel Mercado, he has spent over 5 hours in practicing English. So this is not spent online, but actually 5 hours engaged in conversation. So think about that. For a language learner, that is an awful lot of practice, much more than they would typically get in a real life situation. But what gets interesting is that instructors can then view the trajectory of these students over time. How many times they have practiced these conversations, how many of them completed. They can see the trajectory of the student's progress. So like this student, I can see from the history that first few times didn't work well, a number of false starts, but toward the end, the student is actually doing quite well. This student in this last run, the highest score was over nearly 8 conversational turns per minute, which is at a native speaker rate. So actually he got a mastery score of 105%. In other words, we judge what's the highest level we would expect students to get to. This student is exceeding that level. So here with just a few clicks, me playing the role of the instructor and able to track and make sure that students are progressing satisfactorily. And of course, this provides good evidence to us as well that the instructors are using the platform effectively to support their students' progress. And so there are a couple of reasons for that. And here's basically what we've done is we've provided lesson plans, teacher guides, so teachers understand how they can blend this type of computer-based practice with their classroom instruction. And this has been a key focus of ours over the past year, to provide these kinds of guides and assists to teachers, and we can see from the performance of the students that it's having the beneficial effect. So one approach that we recommend to teachers is start with initial classes, like for each unit, start explaining the topic, the theory behind it, sort of engage in some warm-up exercises with the students. Then the students go off and practice with Alelo, and then when they're ready, when they come back, the teacher knows how much practice they've done, whether they're ready, and then the teacher can engage in further practice in the classroom, at which time the students are better prepared. They're all at a higher level of competency, and so they're able to engage, take better advantage of the classroom time. And students could practice either in a computer lab or at home. Of course, during the pandemic, a lot was happening at home. So this was a key to success. So you go to our website, alelo.com/teacher, and you get access to all the resources that we provide to teachers. So now we're looking at how can we use this technology to help as we emerge from the pandemic. And the issues we now see, as I think we're all aware, is that a lot of people have lost jobs, and so now they need to transition into new occupations, and that requires new skills. And a lot of people lack the necessary skills for the jobs that are available. So this raises the challenge of reskilling people, helping them to quickly develop new skills. And this, by the way, is a problem that's not often addressed in conventional education, because conventional education typically assumes, well, students come in, they may not know much at all about the topic, and now they're learning the new subject area. Whereas we assume students come in with knowledge, with experience, and our goal is to help them transfer that to the new area. And again, the methods we developed, our AI-based methods, help by providing ways for students to do more practice and then to make sure that they're qualified at the end. So we now have a course going on right now to train people, to retrain people to become public health workers and reskill them. And we're doing this online through a combination of collaborative learning, Zoom sessions, as well as other online resources, and the avatar-based learning. One innovation in terms of our teaching approach is we integrate a program navigator into the team. And basically, program navigator, his job is to track the progress of the students, look at those analytics that I just showed you, identify which students appear to be having difficulty, and then reach out to them, intervene to help them to get back on track. And this is proving to be very beneficial for the students, and it also saves a lot of time and effort for the instructors. So instructors don't have to do all of that chasing people down themselves. They can focus on the actual classroom interaction, in this case, virtual collaborative classrooms. So we're just about running out of time. Let me just, if I may, just take a couple of minutes to give you a bit of an illustration of how this type of course works, and then you'll get a sense of how we now apply this in the reskilling and public health context. Health emergency conditions. Training is built around example cases, which trainees can view, discuss, and most importantly, practice. We start with cases that illustrate contact tracing. Contact tracing is a good place to start because it is an important part of public health response and because it involves key competencies that community health workers continuously make use of in their work. The examples you see here use simple stylized avatars suitable for low bandwidth environments. We also use interactive 3D avatars in other courses. First, I'm going to watch how a contact tracing interview is done. Then I'll get a chance to practice it myself.
Hello?
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Hernandez, and I'm calling from the Department of Public Health. Is this Ms. Rodriguez? Initially, address the patient by their title and last name. If you're unsure, it's a good idea to ask how the patient wants to be addressed.
I'm Miss Rodriguez. Why are you calling me?
I need to speak with you about COVID-19 and your health. Is now a good time to talk privately?
Then we walk through the case and explain what you need to do and why.
The beginning of a contact tracing conversation is simply about making sure the contact knows who you are and that you have reached the correct person. You will also need to address confidentiality. If possible, take the time to start building trust with the contact. Let's go through these one by one. It is important that the people you make contact with understand who you are and why you are contacting them.
Then the trainees have an opportunity to start practicing these skills. Hello, this is Louis from the Department of Public Health. Am I speaking with Ms. Rosalie Rodriguez? Call Rosalie Rodriguez.
Hello?
Hi, this is Louis from the Department of Public Health. Am I speaking with Ms. Rosalie Rodriguez?
This is Miss Rodriguez.
Great. I'm glad we had a chance to talk. I'd like to talk with you about some health concerns related to COVID-19.
Oh, goodness. What is it?
I'm afraid you've been in contact with someone who's tested positive for COVID-19.
Oh, my. Is it Luis? I told him he shouldn't be going to those parties.
I'm afraid I can't discuss that with you. We keep everybody's health information private.
Okay, I understand.
And everything we talk about today will be kept private as well.
Okay, this sounds serious.
How have you been feeling the last few days?
I'm feeling fine. I haven't been sick at all.
So now I get a review. So that's just a quick introduction. In the course of our courses, students get an abundance of opportunity to practice with these avatars, as well as practice with their partners online, so that when they actually meet with real patients, they are fully prepared. So we've developed an effective way of integrating this avatar-based instruction with other online activities. So I'll stop here and be happy to take any questions that people might have.
All right, no, great. Thanks so much. This is really cool. There's time for a couple of questions. I'm kind of curious a little bit about how the parsing works and how, how robust it is and all the kind of usual questions, right? So how, especially in the context of the like the train ticket example. So what could it understand versus what could, throw it off a little bit?
We design it so it can understand just about anything relevant to the task. And the way we know that is that actually the system is constantly collecting data. It's collecting examples of what learners say. And so we can measure how effectively the avatars are responding. If we see that the avatar is having difficulty, then we go in and retrain the models with the data that we've collected. So it keeps getting better as more people use the platform.
Is it underlying it? Is it structural? Like, so for example, what if I said, you know what, I don't want a coach ticket, in the place where they were, where they were asking me what kind of ticket I wanted? Would that, not entirely natural to say that there, but I'm kind of curious to know where it's,
Well, so I think there are going to be some instances where it can't understand. And if that happens, then the avatar will say, well, sorry, could you say that a different way? Which, by the way, is a pretty natural reaction if you're talking to a native speaker of English.
Absolutely.
I would say, once we get up to the point where the avatars can successfully recognize about 90% of the things that people say, then that's good enough for a good flowing conversation. And beyond that, it becomes diminishing returns.
I think that makes sense. So it's looking for kind of a combination of structural things and keywords mostly, kind of? Is that about what's going on behind the scenes?
We use natural language classification technology. Basically, we collect examples of of different responses, and then we train classifiers using that data. So it's not looking for specific keywords, no. And in a lot of these cases, there can be a range of possible things that people might say. Exactly. I want to go to New York. I'm interested in planning a trip to New York. I was thinking maybe New York might be a good place to go. Well, yeah, so New York is in common there, but the other ways that you could say things, can be a lot of variation.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So the way you're getting a lot of that is by building it up first on initial data set to train it, and then improving that as time goes on, as you start to see some of the way that other people might phrase it that would be within the realm of reasonable for a course that's teaching people to speak, to speak English in a, way they can
I would say that it works well in tasks where you kind of, it makes sense to proceed one step at a time. In other words, if you were to give a whole lecture to that ticket lady, most of it she wouldn't understand.
Right.
But a lot of it is, you got to say where you're going to go, when you need to go. And by the way, training healthcare workers also fits in that realm. You got to collect demographic information. You got to explain why you're there. It tends, there are particular things that you need to do, but there's not necessarily a fixed script that you follow.
Right.
And in fact, one of the things that we're really training here is for the trainees to pick up when the patient says something, then follow up on that rather than just continue with the script. Like if it says, well, I can't quarantine because I might lose my job. Then you need to respond to that. So, oh well, have you considered talking with your employer about addressing this? These kinds of things.
Right. So the scripts are really the basis for initially, and then you're building on more and more to be able to handle the deviations and different directions people take it, if ever, right?
That's right. And yeah, it's working quite well, actually.
Yeah, no, it's great. No, I think that you've got really nice sort of, it feels like the really appropriate context for it, as you were saying, right? Like, so there's you can handle the flexibility, but as you said, right? I mean, and in real life, if someone gives a lecture to the lady at the ticket counter, I mean, she's tuning out after the first two sentences anyway, and probably should to move on to the next person. So you're not losing anything with that, if you ask me. So I think you're right there.
And by the way, I'll just say one thing.
Please.
Previous talk. So you saw here a desktop mode. We also have a virtual reality interface. That has not been a big deal during the pandemic, of course, because people are working from home. But I do imagine once things get back, going again, that VR interface may get a lot more interest.
Yeah, no, I would think so. Well, fantastic. We're just about at the end of the time, but that's really cool. Thanks for coming and presenting and talking us through it. It's really interesting work and practical work, and I enjoyed it tremendously. So great to have you here. And then that's going to wrap up this session, and then we're going to switch links and go to the closing session with the announcements of the Internationally Learning Award winners. So I will hopefully see all of you over there in just about a minute. So, all right. Thanks once again, Louis. Great talking with you.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.